The hydroponics lab aboard Research Station Epsilon 9 hummed with the soft sound of ventilation systems and nutrient pumps. Marcus Davenport hunched over his workstation, carefully measuring a vibrant blue liquid into a calibrated dropper. After 3 years as the station's lead botanist, he was finally closing in on a breakthrough. "Just a few more drops," he muttered to himself, watching the fluid's surface tension bulge before falling into the Petri dish. The solution rippled, already beginning to react with the plant cells he'd prepared earlier. Perfect. Marcus pushed his glasses up and made a notation in his digital log. Project Aurora, his nutrient formula designed to accelerate plant growth in zero-gravity environments, was showing unprecedented results. If successful, it could revolutionize deep space agriculture and solve food shortages on developing colony worlds. The lab door hissed open behind him. "Good morning, Dr. Davenport." Marcus turned to see Talia Vexer entering, her tall, slender form moving with the natural grace characteristic of Altarians. Her skin held the faintest blue tint, contrasting with the deeper azure of her hair, which she kept in a practical braid that reached her mid-back. Like most of her species, Talia's eyes were large and expressive, pupils expanding and contracting like camera apertures as she adjusted to the lab's lighting. "Didn't expect to see you here so early," Marcus said, smiling at his alien colleague. "And please, I've told you a dozen times, just Marcus is fine." Talia's facial ridges flushed slightly. After 6 months as the station's xenobotanist, she still maintained a formality that amused Marcus. "I wanted to analyze those Centaurian moss samples before the daily briefing," she explained, setting her datapad down. Marcus nodded, turning back to his experiment as Talia settled at her own workstation. He'd come to appreciate her thoroughness and dedication, not to mention her unique perspective on interspecies botanical adaptation. Their collaboration had accelerated his research considerably. "Is that the Aurora formula?" Talia asked, suddenly standing closer than he'd realized. Altarians moved with disconcerting quietness sometimes. "Latest version," Marcus confirmed, gesturing to the dish. "Version 17B, I've adjusted the phosphorus compounds and added a synthetic hormone that might finally solve our gravitational resistance issues." Talia's pupils widened with interest, the closest thing to an Altarian smile. "The cellular response looks promising," she observed, leaning closer to study the reaction. Marcus reached for his coffee mug, not realizing how close Talia had positioned herself. His elbow bumped her arm, jostling the Petri dish. The blue solution splashed upward, several drops landing on Talia's hand. "I'm so sorry," Marcus exclaimed, immediately grabbing a sterilization wipe. "It's nothing," Talia said, accepting the wipe and cleaning her skin. "Our dermal layer is quite impervious to—" She paused, looking down at her hand with sudden concern. "It tingles." Marcus felt a spike of alarm. "The formula isn't designed for direct contact. We should get you to medical immediately." "I'm sure it's fine," Talia insisted, but her voice held uncertainty. She flexed her fingers, then suddenly swayed slightly. "I feel strain." "Sit down," Marcus guided her to a chair, professional concern overriding everything else. "What kind of strange?" "Warm," Talia said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "And there's pressure." Her hands suddenly flew to her chest, eyes widening in alarm. Marcus followed her gaze, then quickly looked away as understanding dawned. The paired thoracic sacs that Altarians used for oxygen storage, structures humans had informally nicknamed air bladders due to their superficial resemblance to certain human anatomy, were visibly expanding beneath her uniform. "Marcus," Talia's voice was tight with panic. "What is happening to me?" I don't know," he stammered, trying to maintain professional composure while avoiding looking directly at her increasingly prominent chest. "The formula accelerates cellular growth, but it was never tested on sentient tissue." Talia stood abruptly, crossing her arms over her chest. The deep blue flush of her facial ridges had spread across her entire face. "Fix this," she hissed, backing toward the door. "Wait, we need to get you to medical." "No," her voice pitched higher than he'd ever heard from an Altarian. "No medical, no records, no one can see me like this." Her eyes were wide with mortification. "Just fix it." Before Marcus could respond, Talia had slipped out the door, leaving him standing beside his experiment, the consequences of which were far more personal than he'd ever anticipated. He looked down at the innocent-looking blue liquid. his mind racing through chemical compounds and potential antidotes. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty lab, already pulling up research databases on his terminal. Somewhere in his work was the key to reverting the changes. He just had to find it before the situation became even more complicated. Outside in the corridor, Talia pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, as she felt the unfamiliar weight on her chest continuing to increase. She couldn't face him now, couldn't face anyone, until this humiliating situation was resolved. Marcus hadn't slept. His lab was a disaster of scattered datapads, sample containers, and half-empty coffee mugs. For 18 hours straight, he'd been analyzing the Aurora formula's components, trying to understand exactly what had happened to Talia. "Computer, run simulation 23C, he commanded, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. The holographic display flickered, showing cellular structures expanding at an accelerated rate. The simulation confirmed what he feared. The formula had triggered runaway growth in the specialized oxygen storage tissues of Talia's respiratory system. Worse still, the synthetic hormone had bonded with her natural biochemistry in ways he hadn't anticipated. His communicator chimed for the 5th time that morning. Station Commander Phillips again. Marcus ignored it. How could he explain that he'd accidentally caused an alien crew member's chest to double in size without proper documentation or medical involvement? The lab door slid open, and Marcus jumped, knocking over yet another coffee mug. "You look terrible," said Lieutenant Quan, the station's security officer, leaning against the doorframe with folded arms. "Thanks for the observation," Marcus muttered, mopping up coffee with a lab wipe. "What can I do for you, Lieutenant?" "Commander's wondering why you've missed 2 scheduled briefings and aren't answering communications." Quan's eyes swept the chaotic lab. "Also curious why our xenobotanist has suddenly requested isolated quarters and personal leave." Marcus winced. Research complications, nothing serious. "Really?" Quan raised an eyebrow. "Because I passed Specialist Vexer in the corridor earlier. She was wearing what looked like a thermal blanket as a poncho and refused to even look at me." "Altarian cultural observance," Marcus lied desperately. "Very private, I'm helping her with some botanical research that relates to it." Quan didn't look convinced but shrugged. "Fine, but the commander expects you both at tomorrow's briefing. Whatever this cultural observance is, it doesn't override station protocols." After Quan left, Marcus slumped in his chair. He needed to talk to Talia. Gathering his courage and some preliminary research, he made his way to her newly assigned quarters at the far end of the residential section. She didn't answer his first 3 knocks. "Talia, please, I have some information about your condition." The door slid open a few centimeters. One large, iridescent eye glared at him through the gap. "Have you solved it?" Her voice was tight with stress. "Not exactly, but I have a better understanding now. May I come in? This isn't a conversation for the corridor." After a moment's hesitation, the door opened fully. Marcus stepped inside, careful to keep his eyes on her face. It was a losing battle. Talia was wearing a standard station uniform that had clearly been modified, stretched and repeatedly adjusted to accommodate her dramatically enhanced chest. What had once been modest, functional respiratory sacs now strained against the fabric like. Well, Marcus tried and failed not to think of the human slang term, coconuts. "Stop starring." Each word was clipped with embarrassment and anger. Marcus jerked his gaze up. "Sorry, I'm sorry." He held up his data pad. "I've been working non-stop. The formula triggered hyperoxygenation in your respiratory sacs, causing cellular replication and expansion." "I don't need the scientific explanation," Talia hissed, crossing her arms defensively over her chest, which only emphasized their new prominence. "I need a solution." "I'm working on a counteragent," Marcus said. "But your biology is complicating matters. The formula has bonded with your hormonal system." Talia sank onto her bed, the mattress creaking under her weight in a way that hadn't happened before. "Do you understand what this means for an Altarian? These organs are meant to be functional and discrete. In our culture, prominent respiratory sacs are considered." She searched for the human equivalent, juvenile and inappropriate, like a teenager trying to attract attention. Marcus sat in the desk chair across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. "I didn't know, but I promise you I'll fix this." "How am I supposed to work, to walk around the station?" Her voice cracked with frustration. Everyone stares, even you can't help it and you're trying not to. What if we bring Dr. Akaffer into this? The chief medical officer could. No, Talia's reaction was visceral. No medical records if word got back to the Altarian Science Council. She shuddered. My career would be over. They'd recall me immediately. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we work on this together privately. I'll bring equipment here if necessary. A soft chime interrupted them, someone at the door. Talia froze, panic crossing her features. Specialist Vexer, called a cheerful voice. It's Ellie from maintenance. I've got those extra pillows you requested. Marcus watched as Talia grabbed the thermal blanket she'd apparently been using as a cover and wrapped it around herself like a shawl before opening the door a crack. Thank you, she said stiffly, reaching for the pillows. No problem. Oh, the maintenance worker's voice turned concerned. Are you feeling all right? Your face is really blue. Cultural observance, Marcus called from inside, repeating his earlier lie. Oh, sorry to interrupt, Dr. Davenport, Ellie replied, clearly surprised to find him there. Her eyes widened with sudden understanding, or rather misunderstanding. I'll leave you two to your cultural observance. The door slid shut, and Talia groaned, pressing her forehead against it. Now she thinks we're engaging in interspecies relations. Despite everything, Marcus couldn't help a small laugh. Could be worse. At least that explains why you needed extra pillows. For a moment, Talia stared at him in disbelief. Then, to his surprise, the corner of her mouth twitched, the Altarian equivalent of a reluctant smile. I needed them to sleep comfortably, she clarified, gesturing to her chest. These are not designed for lying down. The moment of levity passed quickly as Talia winced, adjusting her posture. They're still growing, Marcus. Whatever your formula did, it hasn't stopped. Marcus's smile vanished. I need samples, blood, tissue, anything to help me understand the progression. Talia nodded grimly, pulling up her sleeve to expose the blue-tinted skin of her forearm. Take what you need, just hurry. As Marcus prepared to take the samples, he couldn't shake the feeling that this accident had permanently altered their relationship, and perhaps not entirely for the worse. Behind Talia's embarrassment, he occasionally caught her looking at him with something complex in those large, expressive eyes. Something that made his own heart beat faster, despite the professional crisis unfolding between them. 3 days had passed since the accident. Marcus had converted a corner of Talia's quarters into a makeshift laboratory, just enough equipment to continue his research without drawing attention. Commander Phillips had accepted his vague explanation about a joint xenobotanical project requiring privacy, though not without suspicion. The growth has finally stabilized, Marcus announced, reviewing the latest scan results. No further increase in the past 12 hours. Talia sighed with relief, adjusting the loose-fitting tunic she'd taken to wearing. She'd finally given up on standard uniforms altogether. Can you reverse it now? I'm getting closer, Marcus said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The enzyme I've synthesized shows promise in breaking down the enhanced cellular structures. He was working harder than he ever had in his life, driven by guilt and something else. Something that made him increasingly aware of Talia's presence, her subtle scent like distant thunderstorms, the graceful way she moved despite her discomfort. You're starring again, Talia observed, but her tone lacked the sharp edge of earlier days. Sorry, Marcus mumbled, focusing back on his equipment. It's not entirely unwelcome, Talia said quietly. Marcus looked up, surprised. Talia was standing by the viewport, starlight outlining her altered silhouette. The blue flush across her facial ridges wasn't entirely from embarrassment. I don't understand, Marcus said carefully. Talia touched her chest self-consciously. In Altarian biology, these organs aren't just for oxygen storage. They're also tied to our emotional regulation system. When they're stimulated this way, it creates certain hormonal responses. You mean? I feel things more intensely now, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. Emotions I normally keep controlled are difficult to manage. Marcus swallowed hard. What kind of emotions? Talia turned to face him fully, her large eyes dilating in the dim light. You're a scientist, Marcus. Surely you can hypothesize. The air between them seemed to electrify. Marcus set down his equipment, heart pounding. That would be unprofessional, he said, though he couldn't stop himself from moving closer to her. You're not in your normal state. No, Talia agreed, not backing away as he approached. I'm not, but these feelings, they didn't come from nowhere. The formula didn't create them, it just amplified what was already there. They stood facing each other, close enough that Marcus could feel the warmth radiating from her. He'd never noticed before how the patterns on her facial ridges formed constellations, how her eyes contained flecks of silver among the violet. You've been working nonstop to help me, Talia continued. No one else has ever shown such dedication to my well-being. I caused the problem, Marcus reminded her. And you'll solve it, she said with surprising confidence. But tonight, I'm tired of focusing on problems. Her hand reached for his, fingers intertwining, 3 of hers to his 5, a perfect imperfect fit. The touch sent a current through Marcus that had nothing to do with science and everything to do with the growing tension between them. Talia, he whispered, uncertain. My species doesn't often form attachments outside our kind, she said. But sometimes, rarely, we recognize something in another being that calls to us. I felt it with you even before this accident. Marcus's free hand moved of its own accord, tracing the delicate ridges along her jawline. Talia's eyes fluttered closed at the touch, a soft sound escaping her, pleasure, vulnerability, invitation. I don't want to take advantage, Marcus said, even as he leaned closer. You're not, Talia assured him. This is my choice, clear-minded despite the hormonal changes. When their lips met, Marcus felt a jolt of something entirely new, not just desire but connection across the vast differences of their species. Talia's mouth was cooler than a human's, her taste faintly metallic and sweetly alien. The kiss deepened, her hands moving to his chest as his carefully, reverently settled at her waist. A sudden chime from his equipment broke the moment. They pulled apart, both breathing heavily. The test results, Marcus said, reluctantly turning toward the analyzer. Talia followed, standing close behind him as he reviewed the data. Good news. Yes and no, Marcus frowned at the readings. The compound is breaking down as expected, but there's a secondary effect I didn't anticipate. He pointed to a particular molecular structure on the screen. This suggests the changes might recur cyclically, triggered by your natural hormone fluctuations. Meaning, the solution won't be permanent. You might experience episodes of growth during certain biological cycles. Talia was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Then, to Marcus's surprise, she laughed, a musical sound he'd rarely heard from her. Of course, she said, nothing is ever simple, is it? Marcus turned to her, confused by her reaction. You're not upset. Talia considered the question carefully, adjusting my expectations and perhaps my perspective. Her hand found his again. These past days have been difficult, yes, but they've also brought unexpected developments. The look she gave him was heated, meaningful. Marcus felt his pulse quicken again. We should focus on the treatment, he said, not entirely convincingly. We will, Talia agreed, stepping closer until her enhanced chest pressed lightly against him. Tomorrow. This time when they kissed, there was no interruption. Only the gradual understanding that what had begun as an embarrassing accident had evolved into something neither of them had anticipated but both increasingly welcomed. As clothing was carefully, curiously removed, as alien and human skin pressed together in exploration and reverence, Marcus realized that some scientific discoveries transcended research notes and formal publications. Some discoveries changed everything. Later, as they lay tangled in sheets, Talia's head resting on his chest, Marcus stared at the stars through the viewport and wondered at the strange, winding paths that led two beings from different worlds to find connection in the vastness of space. What happens now? He asked softly. Talia's fingers traced patterns on his skin. Now we find a balance between solving the physical problem and exploring this. And when the commander demands answers, when we can't hide in these quarters forever. Then we face it together, Talia said simply, as researchers, as colleagues. Her eyes met his, vulnerable yet certain, as whatever we are becoming. Marcus nodded, pulling her closer. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, tonight had made one thing clear. Some accidents led to the most important discoveries of all. Specialist Vexer, I don't care what kind of cultural observance this is. Station regulations require all senior personnel at emergency briefings. Commander Phillips's voice crackled through the communication system, stress evident in his tone. Talia and Marcus exchanged worried glances. The unexpected solar flare had put the station on high alert, and their absence was becoming increasingly difficult to justify. "Commander," Marcus interjected, "Specialist Vexor is still experiencing some cultural sensitivity issues. Perhaps I could attend and represent our department." "Negative, Dr. Davenport. The xenobotany expertise is specifically needed for radiation effects on the experimental crops. Both of you, briefing room, 15 minutes. The connection terminated with an emphatic click. Talia slumped onto the edge of the bed they'd been sharing for the past week. The enzyme treatment Marcus had developed had begun working. Her enhanced chest had reduced by approximately 20%, but the changes remained obvious. "I can't avoid this any longer," she said, resignation in her voice. "But the explanations." Marcus knelt before her, taking her hands. "We tell the truth. A laboratory accident with unexpected physiological effects. We've been working on the solution privately." "And us?" Talia asked, her large eyes searching his. "What do we tell them about this?" Marcus hesitated. Their relationship had intensified with startling speed, passion and connection blooming in the enforced intimacy of their situation. But he wasn't naive about the complications they faced. "One problem at a time," he said gently. "Let's handle the medical situation first." Talia nodded, standing to don the loosest uniform she could find and a lab coat over it. Even with these concessions, there was no hiding the changes to her figure. "Ready?" Marcus asked, offering his hand. "No," Talia said honestly, but took his hand anyway. "But waiting won't improve matters." The walk to the briefing room felt endless. Every passing crew member did a double take, though most quickly averted their eyes out of politeness. By the time they reached their destination, Talia's facial ridges were flushed deep blue with embarrassment. Commander Phillips looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion as he registered Talia's altered appearance. The room fell silent as other department heads turned to stare. "Specialist Vexor," Phillips said carefully, "are you, well?" "There was a laboratory accident," Marcus explained quickly. "We've been addressing it privately." Dr. Acaffer, the chief medical officer, rose from her seat, professional concern overtaking surprise. "Why wasn't medical informed? Any physiological changes should be documented and monitored." "Altarian cultural sensitivities," Talia said stiffly. "These particular changes are considered highly private matters." Lieutenant Quan snorted, quickly disguising it as a cough when Phillips glared at him. "Perhaps we should discuss this after the briefing," Phillips suggested diplomatically. "For now, we need your expertise on the radiation shields for the crop specimens." The meeting proceeded with rigid professionalism, though Talia remained acutely aware of the sidelong glances and whispered comments. When it finally ended, Phillips asked her and Marcus to remain behind. "Now," the commander said once they were alone, "I want a full explanation. And spare me the cultural observance nonsense, Dr. Davenport. I've had 3 separate crew members ask if Altarians experience some sort of mating season." Marcus winced. "Sir, it was genuinely an accident. My Aurora formula splashed onto Specialist Vexor and triggered unexpected growth in her respiratory sacs." "Which you didn't report because—" Talia stepped forward. "Because on my world, prominent respiratory tissues are associated with—" She searched for an appropriate analogy. "What humans might consider overt sexual display. It would be professionally devastating if official reports reached the Altarian Science Council." Phillips rubbed his temples. "And the 2 of you have been, what, hiding in your quarters trying to fix this?" The meaningful pause and the way neither of them immediately answered told Phillips more than words could have. His eyebrows rose. "I see," he said finally. "Dr. Davenport, is there a health risk to Specialist Vexor from this condition?" "No, sir, and we've developed an enzyme therapy that's already showing results. The effects are reversing gradually." Phillips considered this. "Dr. Acaffer needs to be informed, no arguments," he added when Talia began to protest. "But we can keep this out of official logs, medical override protocol." "Thank you, Commander," Talia said quietly. "As for your personal situation," Phillips continued, looking between them, "that's not my business unless it affects station operations." His expression softened slightly. Though I'll note that interspecies relationships are not without precedent on deep space assignments. After they were dismissed, Marcus and Talia headed to Medical Bay, walking close but not touching in the public corridor. That went better than expected, Marcus offered. The commander, perhaps, Talia said. But did you see how everyone looked at me? And now we have to explain everything to Dr. Ockhaffer. Dr. Ockhaffer, as it turned out, was professionally fascinated rather than judgmental. After examining Talia and reviewing Marcus's research, she concurred with his treatment approach, but insisted on daily monitoring. The good news, Dr. Ockhaffer concluded, is that your latest blood work confirms the changes are temporary. The formula is breaking down naturally, even without the enzyme therapy. And the bad news, Talia asked cautiously. The cellular memory effect is real. You'll likely experience recurrence during your natural hormonal cycles. Dr. Ockhaffer glanced at Marcus. Especially if certain emotional triggers are present. Talia's flush deepened as she understood the implication. You mean? I mean that strong emotional responses to Dr. Davenport may trigger episodes of enhanced growth, Dr. Ockhaffer confirmed, keeping her tone clinical despite the intimate subject. Your hormonal system has essentially been conditioned to associate him with this physical response. Marcus felt his own face warming. Is there any way to break that association? Time and distance might do it, Dr. Ockhaffer said, or you both might simply need to adapt. Later, walking back to Talia's quarters, their quarters in many ways now, they contemplated this new information. Distance isn't an option I'm willing to consider, Marcus said quietly, once they were alone in the turbolift. Talia looked at him, vulnerability and hope mingling in her expression. Truly, even knowing that being with me means complications, stares, whispers, periodic episodes of these embarrassing changes. Marcus reached for her hand, no longer caring who might see. Talia, I'm a scientist. I've spent my life pursuing the extraordinary. His fingers intertwined with hers. And nothing in all my research has ever been as extraordinary as what I've found with you. The turbolift doors opened, but for a moment neither moved, caught in the gravity of the moment and the decision before them. Then we adapt, Talia said finally, a smile in her voice. Together. As they stepped out, hand in hand, Marcus realized that for the first time since the accident, they were moving forward rather than just reacting, toward a future neither had anticipated but both now embraced, complications and all. 2 weeks after the accident, life aboard Research Station Epsilon 9 had found a new rhythm. The corridor whispers had largely subsided, replaced by the usual chatter about duty rotations and supply shipments. Station personnel had adjusted to Talia's altered appearance with professional courtesy, if occasional lingering glances. In the hydroponics lab, Marcus carefully measured the latest enzyme dose, now refined to maximize effectiveness while minimizing side effects. Last one, he said, offering the vial to Talia. She accepted it with a small smile, drinking the slightly bitter liquid without hesitation. It's strange to think this is ending. Just the treatment, Marcus clarified, watching her with undisguised affection. Not everything else. Talia set down the empty vial, her gaze meeting his. Over the past weeks, her respiratory sacs had gradually returned to near-normal size, still somewhat more prominent than before, but no longer dramatically so. Dr. Ockhaffer's monitoring confirmed that the remaining changes were likely permanent but stable. The Aurora Project review is tomorrow, Talia said, changing the subject. Have you decided what to report? Marcus nodded, gesturing to his revised research notes. Modified conclusions. The formula works for plant tissue but requires significant redesign before any application to complex organisms. He gave her a rueful smile. I've included extensive warnings about cross-species contamination. Wise, Talia agreed. She hesitated, then added, the Altarian Science Council has requested my final evaluation as well. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Are you going to tell them everything? Not everything, Talia said carefully, but enough to be scientifically accurate without compromising my position or yours. Her fingers brushed his arm. I've also requested an extension of my assignment here, permanently. The weight lifted, replaced by a surge of joy that Marcus didn't try to hide. They approved it. Conditionally, They want quarterly progress reports and specific xenobotanical research targets. Her facial ridges flushed lightly. I may have emphasized the unique research opportunities available here. Very unique, Marcus agreed, stepping closer. Their relationship had deepened over the past weeks, moving beyond the initial rush of discovery into something more substantial. They'd learned to navigate their differences, physiological, cultural, professional, with increasing confidence. Commander Phillips wants to see us both after shift, Talia said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. Probably final paperwork on the incident, Marcus reassured her. HFY said the medical override was approved. Talia nodded, though she still seemed preoccupied. Marcus, there's something else we should discuss about us. Before she could continue, Lieutenant Quan appeared at the lab entrance. Dr. Davenport, Specialist Vexer, Commander needs you now. Priority communication from Central Command. They exchanged concerned glances before following Quan to the command center. Commander Phillips stood before the main view screen, his expression unreadable. Good you're here, he said as they entered. Central Command has reviewed our recent research logs. Marcus tensed. Despite their precautions, had something about the accident been reported after all? Phillips continued. They're particularly interested in your Aurora formula, Doctor, specifically its unexpected effects on Altarian physiology. Sir, those effects were accidental and... Phillips raised a hand, cutting him off. Not negative interest, Doctor. It seems Specialist Vexer's quarterly reports to the Altarian Science Council included some intriguing observations. Talia stepped forward, her posture defensive. I included only scientifically relevant information, Commander. Indeed, Phillips said, a rare smile appearing. Information that has apparently sparked considerable interest in both human and Altarian medical communities. The view screen activated, showing a formal communication bearing both Terran Alliance and Altarian Council seals. They're offering joint funding, Phillips explained, for a dedicated xenophysiological research initiative focused on cross-species adaptive treatments. He looked pointedly at both of them, with you two as primary investigators. Marcus stared at the screen in disbelief. They're funding us to study what happened. In a controlled, scientific manner, yes, Phillips confirmed. It seems your accident may have stumbled onto a breakthrough in interspecies medicine. The Aurora compound's ability to induce targeted growth in specific tissues has potential applications in regenerative therapy. Talia's expression shifted from concern to cautious hope, and the Altarian Council approved this. Enthusiastically, once the potential medical benefits were outlined, Phillips said. Your, personal experience provides unique insight no other researcher could offer. After discussing the details of the new research initiative and signing preliminary acceptance forms, Marcus and Talia finally found themselves alone in a quiet observation deck overlooking the station's external gardens. Beyond the reinforced glass, experimental plants thrived under artificial lighting, a testament to their previous research success. You were going to tell me about this, Marcus said, not a question but not an accusation either. I was waiting for confirmation, Talia admitted. I didn't want to raise hopes unnecessarily. She moved closer to him, her hand finding his. This means we can continue working together, officially sanctioned. And continue everything else? Marcus asked softly. In answer, Talia drew him toward her, initiating the kiss this time, more confident now, more certain. Marcus responded with equal fervor, his arms encircling her waist as hers wrapped around his neck. When they finally parted, breathless, Talia rested her forehead against his in a gesture she'd explained was deeply intimate in Altarian culture. I've been thinking, she said quietly, about what Dr. HFY said regarding emotional triggers. Marcus brushed his fingers along her facial ridges, loving how they flushed beneath his touch. The recurring episodes. They've happened twice now, Talia confirmed. Both times after we... She trailed off meaningfully, her eyes sparkling with mischief that would have been unthinkable from the formal xenobotanist he'd met months ago. And you're not concerned? Marcus asked, remembering her initial mortification. Talia shook her head, a very human gesture she'd adopted from him. I'm finding that some Altarian cultural attitudes may be unnecessarily restrictive. Perhaps having these reactions to you isn't something to hide. Her voice lowered to a whisper. Perhaps it's something to celebrate. As if to emphasize her point, Marcus noticed the subtle swelling beginning beneath her uniform, her body responding to their closeness, to the emotional intensity between them. Besides, she added with newfound confidence, now it's officially research. Marcus laughed, pulling her close again. Very important research, he agreed, his lips finding the sensitive spot where her facial ridges met her neck. Requiring extensive documentation. Talia's responding gasp told him all he needed to know about her approval of this research method. Later, as they lay tangled together in the privacy of their now shared quarters, Marcus traced lazy patterns on Talia's skin, marveling at how an accidental spill had led them here, to new research, new understanding, and most importantly, to each other. What would have happened, he wondered aloud, if you hadn't come to the lab that morning? Talia considered this, her head resting on his chest. Science is full of coincidences that lead to discovery, she said thoughtfully, but I believe we would have found our way to each other eventually. How can you be so sure? She raised herself on one elbow to look at him, her eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. Because some connections transcend ordinary probability, Marcus. They're written in something more fundamental than chance. As he pulled her down for another kiss, Marcus silently agreed. In a universe of infinite possibilities, they had found each other across the vastness of space and difference, a discovery more valuable than any formula or research grant could ever be. A small mistake had started their journey, but what they'd grown together was no accident at all.